Hi, I'm Dana, and I've got another bit of a out there one for my content today because I really want to talk about reading because it's one of those things that I think a lot of other autistic people will relate to, and it's just something I've been doing a lot of thinking about lately, and I like to share thoughts on here. It's sort of the point of my channel. So basically, as a young kid and through until probably when I was around 17, I was an absolutely voracious reader. Like, I could read fairly young, I think, compared to a lot of people. I don't know, I'd have to ask someone that knew me as a kid. I don't speak to anyone that knew me as a kid anymore. But I think I started reading a bit earlier than most children do. And I took to it. I really took to it in a way that a lot of kids don't. I was the kid that was always known for having a book. I always had a book on me. I was usually reading. I remember at one point in math class, I hated maths in high school, and I'd sit at the back and try and just get away with like reading my book under the desk. And every single lesson my teacher would notice at some point and come and take my book off me. So I had the really genius idea of just taking multiple books with me. So we'd take one off and I'd spend a few minutes pretending to be work, and then I'd get my book back and carry on reading something. Because I don't know how I did it. Okay, number one, when I was very young, like we're talking maybe 6, 5, like really young, I was big into the horrible histories books, and I'd read like a bunch of pages before bed, and then I'd just like glance at the page and I'd be like, okay, I'm on page 168, and just put it under my pillow, and the next night I'd be like, oh, I was on page 168. I have no idea how I remembered that. I didn't use a bookmark or fold my page down for years. Like, I think I was about 15, 16 when I started folding my pages as a bookmark, because I could just remember exactly what page I was on. Cannot do that now. And also, no book intimidated me. Like, you could give me like a thick little tome and I'd just be like, okay, I'll start reading it and hope it's interesting. I would just read anything and read it for as long and as like in-depth as I could. And I would quite often read things repeatedly if I really liked them. I remember my mum having like proper arguments with like a really young me because I just wanted her to read me the same book at bedtime like over and over and over every single night, and she wanted variety, and I was like, no, I want the same thing every night. It's nice. I like things to be the same. We still didn't realise I was autistic. And because I like so loved books and I was so into reading, I obviously finished reading a lot of kids' books very, very quickly. Like, I remember getting to a point in primary school where I had read every book that was in the library. Like, I'd read the lot. It was all, I'd read it. Editing this has just reminded me, I think that this is why, like, I ended up running essentially a secret library out of my desk in year 5. I stole all of my brother's Goosebumps books. I was big into Goosebumps at one point, and he had nearly the whole collection. So I stole a lot of them off his bookshelf, looked at the bookshelf and was like, that's a lot of books. He's definitely gonna notice this. What do? I can't keep them in the house because he'll just find them. So I took a lot of them to school. I piled like probably at least 25 books into my backpack and took them to school with me. And in year 5, we had like the old-fashioned fucking wooden desks. Like, they had inkwells. I don't know why we still had these old-ass desks. This must have been like 2007. I don't know why we had them. But I was very antisocial as a child, so my teacher had sat me at one at the back, and I was sat alone, which meant I had a double desk. So I had all of my like pencils and papers and like the shit you take to school as a child in one desk, and I had the other one just completely filled with Goosebumps books. And eventually people noticed that I would finish a Goosebumps book, open my little desk, slide it in and just get another one out, and they'd come over and be like, how many have you got? Can I borrow one? They look quite good. So I just ended up running a little unofficial Goosebumps library out of my desk in year 5. And I can only assume, looking back, that must have been the point when I'd read everything else and was like, I need to bring my own shit then, I guess. And I'd begged my parents to take me to like the real library, and it didn't happen very often, and a lot of the time when we did, we were late taking the books back. But every now and again, I got golden little trips to the library, probably from around the age of 11 to 12. No, it must have been younger than that because it was still when we lived in the UK. So probably when I was 9 or 10. And that was when I got into like young adult books. It was the first time that I felt like I had a genre that I could go to in like the library or in the bookshop or wherever I was that had books. It was the first time I was like, oh, I have like a niche. I like young adult romantic fiction, essentially. So from about the age of 10 was when I started getting real into like young adult books, teenage romances. I think I was probably 11 or 12 when I first got into the House of Night books, and that was the precursor for like my entire vampire phase. I read Twilight, I read The Hunger Games, you know, from like, I'd say 11 to 15. I consumed all of like the typical books that everyone was reading at the time. You know, I loved Rainbow Rowell. That's a tough name, there's a lot of letters in that. And John Green and those types of, you get me, you know what I'm talking about. Like if you were there, you get me. If you weren't, you have no idea. But I think most people that are interested in this video will get what kind of books I was reading. And I loved it, you know, 13 Reasons Why and To All the Boys I've Loved Before and Fangirl. I loved Fangirl. I was real into them up until around the age of 16, 17. And I think number one, that was where a lot of things in my life changed. That was the big one for me, is that like I'd moved out from my parents' house. I was in a relationship with my partner at the time. I felt like a grown up. I was having to live as an adult, as a little 17-year-old with no idea what I was doing. But I felt extremely mature and grown up, and like I'd made it. You know, I'm an adult now. I've got the rest of my life ahead of me, but it's not that much because I'm a grown up now. Which meant that I didn't really want to read about high schoolers anymore. You know, I didn't want to read about people going to school and then hanging out at their friend's house and their parents offering them dinner, because I just didn't relate to it anymore. But because I was also so young, I wasn't thinking about like getting married and having babies. So I felt like I didn't really relate to any of the fiction that was, you know, around for people more in my situation. I felt very much like there was just no books I could relate to. And I think the main reason that I always really liked reading was the escapism and being able to imagine yourself in their situation and you're the character. And I couldn't do that anymore because I couldn't find any characters or situations that I really related to or saw myself in. So I'd still read the odd little like young adult book that sounded good. I reread Twilight. So I reread things as and when I felt like it. And I was quite lucky because I've still got a blog. I just do not post on it anymore. But for a long while I was very reasonably consistent with it. So I got sent books to review for a little while, and they were the only books I read for a good many years. Like I'm 25 now, and like I say, I pretty much like stopped reading voraciously at 17, 18 kind of age. So for a long time I was reading like 2-3 books a year, if that, because I just couldn't find stuff that I enjoyed. And every now and again, like I read Charlestown to Charlestown to like review on my blog. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It was just about a family that had like sailed around the world and what they got up to. It was just like a little autobiography. But I really enjoyed it. So I'd try to find other things like that and just be horrendously bored. And you know, I searched, like I really did try. Like I've got the book over there, that The Women Who Run With Wolves or something. Some feminist literature, because I've consistently tried to get back into reading. And I'd get like a handful of pages in or a couple of chapters in and just be, I am so bored. Like this isn't holding my attention. I don't care about this. There's no chance I'm finishing it. And I was very aware that it's because I'd lost my niche. My niche had been young adult stuff and I just couldn't relate to it anymore. And for anyone that was invested in young adult stuff, you'll know that it is very much lumped together. Like you'll pick up one book that's just a pure smutty little romance between teenagers, followed by like some weird ass like, she's a werewolf, he's a gremlin. Will they ever be able to work it out before their families go to war? You know, like it's every genre you can imagine, but with like young adult characters. They don't actually change any like plot lines. They might take out a few naughty words or whatever, but they lump it all together. So trying to venture out of that was kind of really fucking scary. Like I would wander around Waterstones just looking at all these different genres and different books and just be like, what the fuck do I buy? What do I like? You know, for the longest time it seemed to me, and still kind of does seem to me, that adult genres of books are kind of drama, thriller, romance, poetry, or like the classics. And I don't really want to just read a load of George Orwell and Shakespeare. You know, I'm not particularly invested in thriller or crime novels. I don't care, basically. You know, it seems like really difficult to find what you actually like within like the adult genres, I suppose. It's been really difficult for me, at least. And I think I'm also quite specific in what I like to read. I very much need like the right tone. Like, I love Stephen King movies, but I've never read a whole Stephen King novel because I just don't enjoy the tone and the way he writes. Even though, obviously, I'm not saying that Stephen King's a bad writer in any way, but I just don't enjoy the tone and the voice with which he writes. Whereas I recently read Jeanette McCurdy's memoir, I don't get the difference between a memoir and an autobiography, putting that out there, but I read that, really enjoyed it. But it's one of those things where I was then like, okay, so I like memoirs, probably from women that I relate to, so let's look for some, and I can't find any. I don't know where to start looking, I don't know if they're out there, and it's a struggle. Because it really is only this year that I've started to vaguely get back into reading, and even then only slightly. I read Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar back in like April, May. It was a while ago now. And then I read Jeanette McCurdy's memoir, and I was like, oh, I've really enjoyed reading. So I had a day when I was like staying at my girlfriend's, and she lives in the city centre, so I get to feel like some sort of cool city main character when I stay at hers. So I went out into town, I got myself a coffee, and I went and bought a book, which happened to be Milk, Blood, Heat by Dantiel W. Moritz, which I've mentioned in a different video, I think. But it was great. It was a really great book. And from those three, I can very much decipher that I like a strong female voice with a sort of snarky, funny tone. I don't like people that take themselves too seriously. I'm quite allergic to anything that I deem pretentious. So it really is the right balance for me. And I feel pretentious saying that I like Sylvia Plath. I also read The Colossus, but I won't pretend I didn't understand the arc of it. I enjoyed it. But I feel like that was because at the time I'd just read the Bell Jar and I'd like hyperfixated on Sylvia Plath and found out a bunch about her life. So I think it was more like the hyperfixation made me enjoy it than that I actually enjoyed reading The Colossus. But like that's the thing, you know, like I think I could be a poetry bitch. I have found poetry that I really like. I say I found poetry that I really like, that's a lie. I've met people who happen to be very good poets, who are from like a similar working class sort of background to me. So even though they're good poets and they've obviously learned like the art of poetry, it's still understandable to me, it's still legible. Because I find a lot of poetry, you've got like 6 lines to describe someone's like fucking hair or something. And it's like by the time I get to the 3rd line, I'm so busy like absorbing the words that I'm completely losing what meaning there is in the actual poem, you know. I really struggle with poem reading. But then there's the odd time, like but then there's poets like Caroline Duffy who like I really like, and as far as I'm aware, she's from like a similar background to myself, I think. I could be super wrong. I keep thinking that people are working class and I'm finding out that they're really not, because apparently like actual working class people rarely actually get to be famous or rich. But that's a whole different topic. But yeah, I would really like to be a poetry bitch, but I'm not going to shame myself, I just don't understand half of it. And I think that we need more people to admit when they don't understand stuff, so I'll do it. I'll be the one to do it. But I am sort of just stuck in this little space now where I'm like, I think I understand what kind of books I like, but I haven't got a clue how to find them or if they're actually out there. I think my next step's going to be looking more into Dantiel W. Moritz. Got to be looking up their name and how to spell the... Well, first it's going to be looking up how to pronounce their name, and then into more of what they've written, because I really enjoyed that book. They have a great voice and great like characterisation to the characters within the book, and I really enjoyed it. And I like that. I like a strong character, but I also very much require female characters, I think. I think when it's a sort of like man-filled or very masculine, manly type of thing, I just don't get it, I don't enjoy it, and I don't care to. You know, I read for my personal enjoyment. I read to escape and relate and to fall a little bit in love with a fictional character. And that doesn't happen with men for me, so I don't like them in novels. Like, I'm not a man hater, some men are great, I just don't want to read about them, you know, like in general. I think I really want to read Patti Smith's novels, they're just kind of pricey. I want to read like The M Train and that. Probably shouldn't have been online, but I might just see if I can find a PDF somewhere. I don't think that reading should be kept away from people just because they don't have money. And I understand that's what libraries are for, but I'm an anxious little bitch. I don't want to have to go into a library and speak to people. But yeah, to wrap up, the basis of this is just that I think this is probably a struggle that a lot of autistic people have, because a lot of us do really enjoy reading, especially as children. You know, you've forever seen it as like essentially a trait of autism, as being like a massive voracious reader. I think there's probably a bunch of us out there who struggled with switching from like children's books to adults books and whatever's in between, or whatever you started with to whatever you feel like you're supposed to be reading. And you know, like, just outgrowing something and not knowing what you're meant to progress to, I think is the difficulty that's been there for me, and I think it's probably quite relatable to a lot of people. I don't know if it is necessarily like an autism trait, or if it's perhaps something that lots of people experience. It's just a human characteristic that I'm mistaking for an autistic trait. It's entirely possible, and I don't know, because I just know what I do and I'm autistic, so you tell me. But yeah, I've said everything I wanted to say. I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts and book recommendations, things that you've enjoyed reading, how you got back into reading, what made you stop reading, whatever you want to say about this topic, I would love to read. And then we can count that as my reading for the day. No, but I would really like to get some comments on this if you want to comment. If you haven't already, if you'd like to like the video, subscribe. I think you can hit the bell icon is what people say. I don't know what difference it makes if you have notifications on or not, because I don't get told when people have notifications on. Whereas I get told when someone subscribes to me, so I assume that's like the important thing. I don't know, it'd just be nice to have you around in this little community that we built here for when I upload new content that I know you're all waiting for. Like, get sad at your computers just refreshing the page thinking like, oh god, I wish Tina would upload. But luckily for you, I actually do twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays at 4:30 p.m. UK time. So you can just come back at that time and not have to sit refreshing your computer like I know you all do. So whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, day, afternoon, week, month, year. And I'll see you again in a few days.